meeting to order, meeting of the Englewood City Water and Sewer Board for August 11th, 2020. First thing on the agenda would be approval of the agenda, or yeah, the minutes. No, approval of the agenda itself. And that has been done. Clyde has done that.
Yes.
Right.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Yes, that has been done. So we will move on to roll call.
Chairman Wiggins is on, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Yay!
Thank you, Clyde.
Sorry about that.
Okay, we're back to roll call, and we'll start off with myself, Chairman Wiggins, and we'll go to Mr. Hobadick.
Present.
Caitlin Mercier.
Present.
Dan Roth.
I'm here.
John Moore. John Moore. Okay, Francisco Martinez.
Present.
Drevis Ridley.
Present.
All right, now we go for Councilmember Joe Anderson.
He's on his way in.
Okay, Councilperson Cheryl Wink. Okay, Mayor Olson.
Here.
Okay. And that looks like we've got a quorum, so we're in business here. We've got a roll call. Now I need approval of minutes for the July 14th meeting of the Siyuan Water Board. Does anybody have any additions, corrections, or deletions? Okay, if not, can I get a motion to accept the minutes from July 14th?
I'll move.
Second?
I'll second.
Second.
Motion second. Okay, all in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed? All right. We now move to public forum. Is there anybody, Jay, that is requested to attend this meeting by Zoom?
No, no one requested, and I do not see anyone present in the attendees list.
Very good. Thank you very much. Well, then the next thing is number 6, new business. And that goes down to our director, Peter, wants to talk about our budget presentation for 2021.
Thank you, Chairman Wiggins and members of the board. I will be presenting the proposed budget for the Water Enterprise Fund and the Sewer Enterprise Fund. This is actually the same presentation that I gave to council last night as part of the larger entire city budget presentation, but this is specific to the water and sewer enterprise funds themselves. So let me share my screen here. Make sure I get the right one. Okay, does everybody see that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. So so all the work that we've been doing and talking about over the last several months has now merged in with the budget process, and this is our process that the city's had underway for the entire city since about the May timeframe, and this is the formulation of the entire city budget. And so this is the water enterprise portion of that. Let me hang on. I gotta click my screen. There we go. And so this is the summary of where we are from a budgetary perspective. And you can see the 2020 budget numbers, the proposed 2021 budget numbers, and then the difference between the two. And you'll see there's a couple areas that went up quite substantially. One is personnel, which is the first line item. And then the fourth line item down is the capital expenses. And that is all in direct relation to what we've been building towards over the last several months in the rate and fee presentations, as well as the master plan presentation that we started with back in April. And so you can see the personnel is the increase there is made up of primarily we've recommended 8 new positions, 3 in engineering and 5 in operations. And then we have annual increases due to raises and health benefits, things like that. On the capital expenses side, we are working to get a jump start on several of these more immediate priority projects, electrical being one of them, getting the pump station designs underway, and then also starting some of those programmatic replacements such as water lines and lining of sanitary sewer. So you can see the budget overall went from about $12 million in 2020 to just over $19 million in 2021. So these are the priorities. Our priorities are similar to what we've been talking about all summer, with a reinvestment into the infrastructure. We have a lot of deferred maintenance, and we're trying to get back on top of it so that our infrastructure becomes more reliable. Fiscal sustainability is a piece of what we've been doing with the financial modeling process to ensure that we have the revenues necessary to make that reinvestment, as well as be conscious of the effect on the customer. Staffing needs are something that we've talked about as a way to balance being able to do work in-house versus contracting it out, and how to efficiently optimize the use of in-house staff versus contracted staff, either engineers or consultants or contractors. We want to work towards modernization. A lot of that's in our SCADA area in our plants. And then optimization of water resources is a focus that we are looking at in terms of helping to understand.
Excuse me, Director Van Rye.
Yes.
Can somebody please mute their microphone? We hear the noise in the background. Thank you.
So the last piece is optimization of water resources, and that's to start to look at our water portfolio differently and see if there's ways that we can leverage additional revenue. These are the staff that we've proposed. SCADA technician, that's for the electrical and electronic interface of all the controls for the pump stations and plants. There's a lot of programming that automates that, and so someone to manage and oversee and diagnose and fix that those programming elements. An asset manager, which is a individual who really looks at taking the results of the master plan and moving it into actionable projects. Water resources engineer, that's someone who can dedicate their time to working with our water rights attorney, our water rights legal, as well as engineering staff and operational staff, to figure out how to best optimize our portfolio in a way that, again, potentially yields us additional revenue in the future if we can figure out how to do that. Operations and maintenance division, we have a need for a water treatment superintendent next year. We had a position there. We've used that most immediately for a water operations supervisor position because it's a more immediate need. So we'll be bringing that request for a superintendent back to oversee all of the operations at the Allen plant specifically. The distribution and collection supervisor is on our that's basically our collection system and our water distribution system. Right now, our superintendent there has 11 direct reports, and so we're trying to split that into more manageable sub-teams so that we can get more focus and more predictability in terms of the workload execution. 2 water treatment plant operators. That I would say that if there's an area that we are razor thin in terms of staffing, it is at the water plant. We would like to get to the point where we no longer have segments of the 24-hour period where there's only one individual in the plant. I think it's not only a safety issue, but it's also an issue with being able to execute project work. If we have 2 people there, we're able to execute projects on a 24-hour basis. I would also go back to, more importantly, in my mind, it's a safety issue because it's one of our most important facilities, and we have several blocks of time every day where it's one individual at the plant by themselves.
It speaks for itself. Yeah.
Yeah. And then the last piece is the water process maintenance technician. So we have one maintenance tech. We basically have one process maintenance technician right now that has to is the only person available to fix things that break at the water plant, at our pump stations, at our tanks that have associated pump stations with them, our distribution system pump stations. So we want to build up a maintenance group. So that's where those positions come from. These are some of the programs that we'll be focusing on. There are things that we've talked about. Valve exercising is a way to prevent valve breakage over time. Hydraulic modeling software is to help us further understand our system in a digital format, which helps us prioritize work. Lead service line replacement, we want to have a base level program that we move forward with as it relates to lead service line replacement, realizing that priorities could shift in the future. Lagoon dredging, that's for our 2 lagoons that are right next to the Allen plant. There's a certain amount of solids that come in, and as they build up over time, we lose volume for water in those in that plant or in those basins. And so we should get on a program where every 5 to 10 years we're doing a dredging to reestablish the water volume of those reservoirs. And then hydraulic flushing and testing, again, is really just the way to keep our systems fresh and clean and flush out any of the sediments that may end up in the system over time. So in order to do everything that we've been optimizing over the last several months since we've been talking, there are some increases that are required. So from a rate perspective in 2021, we would be proposing a 4% rate increases on the rate itself. We are also recommending the institution of a new capital investment fee at $15 a month. That's to go directly towards investing into some of these capital projects that are definitely in need. So those are the fees on the monthly bill. The next 2 are connection fees, and those are fees that one-time fees that when a new user comes onto the system, they pay. For example, a brand new house. So we are recommending a new water resources connection fee of $17,504 and a water system connection fee decrease of $2,888 to $1,472. And that's to more correspondingly match to the water resources portfolio itself versus the distribution and collection system itself. I won't go through these individually, but when you should have this in your packet. These are the proposed projects that we have scheduled for next year. I'll point out the SCADA improvements on construction at $2 million. As we start digging into that, we realize that we have some significant things that we need to address, some of which are pretty significant life safety issues. We have a lot of, so our water plants and our pump stations run 480 volt electric, which is significantly, well, it's just big electrical systems. And there's a whole process called arc flash, which, so when you flip breakers on electricity that big, you can get a flash of an arc or a flash at the time that occurs that actually can cause serious harm, or even in unfortunate cases can ultimately kill someone. And so we do arc flash studies in order to understand our arc flash risk, and then we make sure that we're instituting the necessary protocols in order to ensure the best safety for our employees. We're uncovering that we have a number of those, we have a number of gaps in that area that actually, I can remember early on, I was asked, what's the thing that makes you the most nervous about the systems? This has now become one of the things that's right near the top of my list in terms of things that make me nervous, because this is the kind of stuff that can really injure our employees, and we're trying to get ahead of it as fast as possible. And it's really because it's just fallen out of, it's just fallen out of repair and maintenance. And so to catch back up is going to take a significant investment in the near term. This is just a remainder of the projects that we talked about. Other things that all of which are, you know, I mean, it's hard to pick one in here that's one that we would prioritize over another because they're all extremely important projects. So that is the quick summary of the water fund budget. So I'd open it up for questions.
Anybody want to ask Peter questions? Don Roth? Well, I guess nobody. Go ahead, Don.
I guess my only question, and I didn't see it in there, maybe it's coming up later, about the Big Dry Creek project.
I can provide an update on the Big Dry Creek project. It is here. It's the third line down, Big Dry Creek diversion. We actually had that programmed for this year, and as Steve has gotten that project re-kicked off, it was basically sitting idle for some time. As he's gotten that kicked off, what we've determined is we need an easement from the Colorado Water Conservation Board, and so it's a bit of an arduous process to go through securing that easement. So that is likely going to take us into the fall. In the meantime, he's re-engaged with the engineer, which is McLaughlin engineers, water engineers, to provide engineering services during construction to complete out the remaining elements of that project. And essentially the project's, I would say, somewhere around 70% complete. The pipeline's in, one of the vaults is in. We need to install another vault. We need to install the bladder dam that creates the diversion. And then we need to install the associated appurtenances for those two vaults. And so we've moved that money from 2020 into and reprogrammed it into 2021, anticipating that we would be able to get that work underway ideally in first quarter of next year. It might be a little bit later. It all depends on how quickly we can secure that easement.
Does that answer your questions, Don?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. I have a question, Peter. On this budget you have, did that come out in previous paperwork, or was that just from your meeting last night with council?
This is just from last night at council. So this is our segment of the budget preparation that was presented to council at study session last night. I just pulled those same slides out to present to the board this evening.
Okay, is there any chance that in the future you could make hard copies and get them to the members of the board, please?
We can definitely do that.
I would appreciate it, unless anybody else doesn't want a copy.
Yeah, you know, and this is part of the, I think, a little bit of what's been lost in the transfer. I understand that some board members require hard copies and some are okay with digital copies. If we can just get with Jay, if you need a hard copy, if you can just get a confirmation to Jay, then we'll make sure that we get you a hard copy.
We'll do that. Thank you, Peter.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I apologize for not getting this in hard copy form to you sooner.
No big deal. We got it here. We'll get it sooner or later. Thank you.
Okay.
Next question, Caitlin Mercier has wanted to talk about water quality. You want to give her up to date on that?
Sure. So do you want me to address the question that was
on the agenda, right?
Okay. So as I recall, your question was the water quality being better 10 years ago than it is today. And so I think, it's a hard question because there's not one singular answer to it. If you were to talk to our process people at the plant, we've actually made improvements at the plant process that actually have improved the water quality. The issue is that once it gets into the distribution system and some of these other systems that have been, that basically have not been reinvested in over time, that's where I think can be the potential for a decline in water quality. Additionally, we actually brought in a treatment engineering expert that I know from from one of the consulting firms that I've worked with in the past, because I wanted him to walk through the plant and look at it from a fresh perspective to see if there were things that we could do from a treatment process that would help to improve the taste and odor quality of the water, especially during the summer. Because in the summer, I mean, our water comes directly off the Platte, and so in the summer you can definitely tell that it's definitely summery, and so we think that there might be some optimization in the way we treat, that's bringing him in to help provide that completely objective point of view to help us think of new ideas. He's already proposed a couple of changes that we could make in our process relative to our filters that we're gonna look at instituting. But the other thing I've asked him is, are there any smaller capital projects that are more immediate as it relates to any kind of chemical addition that we can do to knock out that taste effect that occurs more often during the summer. And so that's a roundabout. That's not necessarily directly answering your question, but it's a hard question to directly answer, and that's what we're doing to try and mitigate the issue. I will tell you, as a customer as well, you can definitely tell different times of the year when there's a difference in the taste to the water. For me, it's fairly subtle, but for others, I think they notice it more so.
How about that, Caitlin? Does that help you out there?
Yeah, it does. It's weird because my parents live kind of close to Cherry Creek Village, like on that side of Inglewood. And then I live on the very other end. But I'm definitely at the end of the line, the service line, and my parents isn't quite there. They're quite a few blocks away from being at the end of the line. So it's just interesting that both our water tastes about the same. And I'm from, I think I'm not even in the district, the water district. I'm like connected onto the water district, I think, or maybe that's just my waste. But anyways, so it's just interesting that they both taste not great. And I remember like 10 years ago, I thought the water tasted great, like consistently great. And now it's just weird that since I've moved back to Inglewood, it's not as what I remembered. So.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that this is an uncommon feedback that we get, and it is definitely a priority of ours in terms of trying to figure out how we can fix it. There's smaller, more immediate things that I think we can do, but then there's the larger systemic investment that we need to make, which is, also part of the reason why we're shifting the whole financial revenue models for the water fund.
Thank you very much,
Can I
Peter.
ask?
Chairman, I have Mayor Olson's hand up, and then Member Joe Anderson will be next.
Okay, Mayor?
Travis,
I'll go ahead, Joe.
put your hand up, Travis.
I've been in Inglewood. I grew up in Denver, where the water was always 100% the best water I ever tasted. I came to Inglewood and I thought it tasted like cat litter. I mean, it was just terrible. I'm at the end of the line. Beyond me is the park. So the water I get is not good quality, but I did notice in the past, you used to flush the lines, and I haven't noticed that as often anymore. Do they not do that anymore?
No, we still do an annual flushing. What we do an annual flushing program, it's usually in the April timeframe,
Okay.
right after winter, and that's after low demand season when water has been sitting in the pipes longer. There's another piece of the system that we're looking at. We like to keep the system completely looped so that we don't have dead end lines. And I know we have a number of dead end lines that we're looking to try and figure out how to get them looped or get them on a more systematic flushing so that you don't end up with water quality issues. That's part of the investment of the model. Will help us understand that and determine where that makes sense. But it is definitely, again, another one of the investments in the system that we need to make. I think the quality is to some degree suffering because we are significantly behind our neighboring communities as it relates to the monthly investment into the water system by the customers.
Okay. All right.
So I actually, Travis, I was asking if you knew how to put your hand up on the system so that
I
you don't
don't.
get left out. If you put it over, cursor over, anyway, we can figure that out. It's fine. So I had to chuckle, Caitlin. I think your parents must live in my area, right? By Cherry Hills, further over to University.
Yeah, they live.
That where you grew up
between-
too?
Yeah, that's where I grew up. They live between like Shenango and Clinton.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, on
further south.
Grant Street. So
Yeah,
they're
John Moore and I live in this district, and my hunch is that he will say the who knows what he'll say, but the water has always tasted awful. And it's worse if you're pregnant, let me tell you, because I had 3 kids and I could never drink it when I was pregnant, and then it would go away, but it was because I wasn't pregnant. But I think it's got a very vegan-y kind of vegetarian taste to it some days. My question though, Peter, is that when we had our last settling of our lawsuit with Denver, there was an agreement in a $600,000 amount of money that they gave us in that settlement, and it was supposed to go toward the taste of the water. Whatever happened to that? Do you know?
So I don't know where the money actually, I don't know if the money's actually been put in some kind of a separate fund. Part of as my understanding on it was that $600,000 was a contribution to the Big Dry Creek diversion project. And one of the things for the Big Dry Creek diversion project that it's supposed to improve from a water quality perspective is the hardness. And so when there's a rainstorm in the summer and
that's right,
and the Big Dry Creek fills up and it flows, it's getting all that runoff, and then 100 feet away or 100 yards away is our intake, and so it gets that really churned up runoff water. And what the Big Dry Creek diversion project will do is it'll divert that water down below our intake.
You're right. I'm probably conflating the two, but as far as I've lived in Inglewood since '86, it's always tasted terrible, and I've just gotten used to it. Maybe sometimes it's worse, and it's usually during as you say, the spring, but sometimes even right now it can be really funky. And I am at the end of the line, but I don't know what we can do. But it's the number one thing, and even in our national survey, people complain about our water. It's the local survey with the national company that we do, but people continue to complain.
Yeah, and it is not a simple challenge to address, I would say, but yeah. I think it is one that we can address if once we get a plan and we start making the investments.
Thanks.
Anybody else want to jump in here and comment on that matter?
I was wanting to jump in, Chair Wiggins, if you don't mind.
No, go ahead, Joe.
Thank you. So Director Van Rye, I'm wondering if there's a way to, it sounds like there's some element of the water quality issue that's taking place at the Allen Water Plant, and there's some portion of it that we think might be in the distribution system, but is not equally experienced throughout the city. Is there a way to evaluate that, to do samples from around the city at the same time and run the hardness on them and see if we can identify if there are places that are consistently worse? So if we're going to invest in the distribution system in a way that improves the water quality, we're making the investments in the most intelligent kind of ways.
Yeah, so I'd say that, there's 2 answers to that. One being that we do have a number of test stations throughout the city that we pull water quality samples on, and that's actually for our state compliance. And so we do actually have the ability to, we have a distributed network of testing throughout the facility, throughout the system. The second piece is that water model. And so when we can get a calibrated water model that matches what we're experiencing in the physical world, physical reality of the distribution system, then what that allows us to do is it allows us to run scenarios and make proposed changes to the system without doing physical work to the system, but seeing it in a digital form to see what the effects are. And so prior to the master planning effort, we didn't have a water model that we didn't have much of a water model at all. So now we have a skeletonized version of a water model. The next step is to then make that an all pipes network. So basically every pipe in the system. And what it'll show is it'll show where you have dead end lines. It'll also, you can actually take it and map water age. And so depending on the demands on the system, you can actually spread a plot of what the actual water age is for a particular area of the city.
Interesting.
That's great. Great to know. Thank you.
Somebody
Chairman,
else?
we have Council Member Wink's hands up.
Cheryl?
Thank you, Jay. Thank you, Clyde, or Chair. So,
Clyde is fine.
so I hear a lot of constituents comment, as we've heard this evening, on the taste and the odor of our water in Englewood. And I hear those individuals equate that with quality. Because water may taste or smell less than ideally, in what I know, and I'm not anywhere professionally licensed in this, it doesn't mean that the quality is poor. Director Van Ryn, am I correct? Because I feel that, especially now on council, I'm constantly defending the water because of what I understand to be the quality of the water, regardless of whether it smells or tastes funny. I think if the quality were below a certain acceptable threshold, we wouldn't emit it out or into the city. So are we really having a water quality problem, or water smell, water taste sometimes?
Well, I think water quality is a much more, it's a broader encompassing concept, basically. And so we have water quality standards that we have to meet with the state and EPA. And so those are drinking water standards. So that's where we meet our water quality expectations. And then
so there isn't a water quality problem in the city. You have to, by law, adhere to the quality standards.
That's correct. We have to adhere to the water quality standards from the state and
no
EPA.
choice. Okay.
That's correct.
Continue. Thank you.
And in instances where something comes up, we have to report that to all of our customers. And so then you have that base water quality piece, which is our regulatory expectation. And then you have the broader quote unquote water quality associated with the taste and the odor and the aesthetics of the water. That's the two are separate, but they're also, they're both important, I guess is what I would say.
Oh, sure. I just know saying we have poor water quality means something beyond what I feel a lot of people recognize it actually means. And maybe I'm too granular in my thought, but I just wanted to, I feel like maybe it's an opportunity for the city to educate, clarify, so that people don't think that harm is coming their way if they think there is a water quality problem. Those who might not understand the regulatory requirements that are consistently being met.
Absolutely. And what I will say is that there are also improvements to the system that I think can further improve quality of the water. I mean, not just from the baseline level, but to be even better than what the baseline requirements are.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Director Van Ryn.
Anybody
Chairman,
else?
we have Mayor Olson's hand up.
Okay, Mayor.
Thanks. Clyde, when I have my hand up, can you see it on my screen?
No, your screen has a lovely picture of you with a red blazer on, and I don't
But
see you moving.
it has a little blue hand up in the corner. Anyway,
Okay.
most people just don't notice that. I'm sorry, I have it off because I am in a place where Wi-Fi is not great, so I'm just using my sound. I think that what Cheryl said about quality is important with our citizens. I think the difference is safety. People want to make sure it's safe to drink. And sometimes when it doesn't taste good, people don't think it's safe. And we probably have to keep explaining that quality is larger than just safety.
Exactly.
And yeah, I don't think the quality of the taste is great, but I think it's safe. So I don't worry about drinking it. And I prefer to drink running water than bottled water still, because I don't think that bottled water is very safe. But I just want to make that distinction, and maybe it's just a continuance of explanation in the Citizen and other places, but ultimately it'd be nice to fix it. And I know it's expensive, so we're going to keep working on that.
I would indicate that I remember everybody got a mailing from the water department indicating our standards that they met and all the loops you had to go through, and you printed it up and it shows the quality of water and how we adhere to it and how the samples are taken. So if the citizen wants to really study it, they can see what the water looks like. I want to also indicate, I noticed while we were talking about this issue, Mr. Moore and Caitlin both had a drink of water while this is going on. So water must be all right there, all right in that case.
I have my water bottle.
Everybody's got your water, okay.
I have a
Chairman,
filter that gets out the taste.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Deputy Director Goodman would like to make a comment. Her hand is up.
All righty, go to it.
I just wanted to say thank you to Councilmember Wink and to Mayor Olson for coming up with that clarification for safety versus aesthetically pleasing. So the water is safe to drink, it just may not be aesthetically pleasing. And having, come into this position recently, but working at the Allen treatment plant, I mean, that's definitely a charge that we take very seriously, wanting the residents to not only just have water to drink, but to enjoy it.
Very good. Just a side question. If I went down to the Allen plant, would I run into you down there at the plant, or are you at City Hall?
No, you would run into me. I am down at the Allen treatment plant. Yes, please stop by.
Drop by and see us sometime. Thank you.
Of course.
Just wear a mask.
Yes.
Wash your hands. Yeah.
And wash your.
Yeah, we installed a trailer at the Allen treatment plant that has 8 office spaces in it, and that houses Deputy Director Goodman as well as Deputy Director Steve Simon, as well as a number of the other positions that we're hiring this year as well as next year.
Very good. Thank you. Well, if nobody has anything further on that issue, the next one is C, which is the water main break. Again, Caitlin brought it up.
Council or Chairman Wiggins, I have a whole presentation on sewer.
Oh.
Yeah. So now we'll go on to the sewer fund.
You're only halfway done, right? You're only halfway done with your PowerPoint?
I'm halfway done with I've only done the water fund. So now sewer actually goes faster. So we'll get onto that. And so this is what we presented last night for the sewer fund. And here is the summary, and you can see the 2020 budget, it was around $22 million, and the proposed 2021 budget is $24 million. So those numbers are so big because of the Englewood's half of South Platte Renew, which also includes all the connector districts that feed through Englewood into South Platte Renew. So that's why that's such a
Director Van Rye, I am so sorry to interrupt you again. Would you like to share your PowerPoint?
Oh, shoot. I didn't. Oh, thank you. Sorry.
Caitlin was worried about that.
Please.
Sorry about that. Thank you. Okay. Everybody see that?
We got it.
My apologies. Okay, so you can see it's 22 million in 2020 and went up about 1.6 million in 2021. Our significant areas are capital expenses, which the capital expenses are predominantly related to the South Platte Renew. We also have some debt service. So because of the schedule of projects at South Platte Renew to meet the Regulation 85 treatment requirements from the state, we are planning to issue debt in 2021 to cover that project, as well as some other projects that are in the capital program for South Platte Renew. Very similar in terms of our priorities initiatives. The only change is really to adequately fund South Platte Renew. That's a priority from a partnership perspective to ensure that the city of Littleton is confident that the city of Englewood is funding, and then the city of Englewood is correspondingly confident that the city of Littleton is funding South Platte Renew. The staffing additions for the sewer fund are actually percentages of the staff that I've already covered. And so if you recall from the water fund, there were 2 positions that were 70%. These are the two positions that are the other 30%. That's because they're associated with the sewer fund. Oh, shoot. So these are the programs that we want to focus on. Cleaning and flushing of our sewer mains is an important project to ensure that we don't have backups. Again, that hydraulic model software that helps us understand the system. And then the CCTV sewer inspection is really our #1 priority, because what that'll do is that'll allow us to quantify the magnitude of the issues relative to the collection system. Our collection system is predominantly clay pipe. And if clay pipe sits undisturbed, it will last for hundreds of years. If it gets disturbed, it's very brittle, it can crack, and then it creates problems. And so we want to be able to target the appropriate areas when we do lining projects or replacement projects. The rate and fee changes we're proposing a 4.5% increase to the sewer rate, and then a change to the sewer collection connection fee. We would have the connection fee relative to the collection system go down by $799, and then the treatment component would go up by $569 to a total of $1,969. These are a few of the capital requests that we have, and the CIPP is that's the pipelining project for when we do have those cracked and damaged pipes, and that is the sewer fund.
Anybody have any questions for Peter? All right.
Okay.
Do you want to move on to the water main break that Caitlin was referring to over by somewhere by waste management over there? I think it was it Caitlin?
Yeah, it was off of Union between Santa Fe and Federal.
Yes,
I believe.
thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Chairman Wiggins and board. We have Deputy Director Goodman actually has a small presentation that actually will go through that break, as well as associated work that we had to do in order to fix that problem. So I will turn it over to Deputy Director Goodman.
Deputy Director Goodman, can you hold on 1 second? I see that Member Martinez's hand is up. Do you have a follow-up question for Director Van Rye?
Just a real quick one, if that's okay.
Okay.
Yes, absolutely.
I wonder how much emphasis in regards to keeping certain sewer lines up to date, especially for residents, and I don't know if this is necessarily on point, how much we can try to advertise or input to the extent people can have their own sewer lines updated. I know I live in an old house with old clay pipes, and every year or so we have to get someone to come in and clear out certain roots and flush out the pipes, as it were. I don't know if there's certain things we can do to advertise to keep, to the extent that people can't afford to have that done to their house. Is that something that's feasible or will help the main system, or does that kind of not really add up to helping the larger system?
Well, it does help the larger system at the primarily at the point of connection with the main. Sometimes that root intrusion can actually get to the point where it gets all the way into the main and then causes a bigger problem where it then backs up the system into other homes and businesses. And so as we go through and do the CCTVing, we'll be able to identify those areas that are root intrusion problems, and then we can then notify the homeowners of the need to fix that. The ownership of the service line itself is from the home all the way to the main. And so the homeowner actually owns the pipe into the street and is responsible for the pipe into the street.
Okay, thank you. That helps.
Okay.
Okay, Ms. Goodman.
All right, so can you all see my screen?
We can.
Okay, so the water main break in question was a 16-inch main break that occurred on South Platte River and West Union Avenue. The break actually occurred on Saturday, the 18th of July. Our distribution and collection crews went out and isolated, which is standard operating procedure for breaks. And they inadvertently caused an outage of basically, I think, the entire southwest area of Englewood. We started getting a whole ton of calls at the treatment plant and kind of realized right away that we needed to open that valve back up and see if we could get water back to those folks. I don't know if you guys remember, it was probably about 100 degrees that day and people were using a lot of water. So we couldn't quite figure out exactly why. And I'll kind of move into that, the investigation of the repair a little bit further on. The very next day, they actually completed the repair on a Sunday. There is, I think it's Brandon, Sand and Gravel, and then Waste Management is right there. So they wanted to make sure they were causing the least amount of impact to both the residents and the businesses. So there was little to no truck traffic on Sunday, so they completed those repairs then. The next couple of weeks, we actually spent trying to figure out what exactly happened and why we put all of those residents out of water. We found that the secondary feed, which is a 14-inch water line, had a mostly closed valve. So basically when we shut off that main feed, we basically shut off accidentally all of the water feed to that neighborhood. As we were going around checking valves in the area, we found 2 additional broken valves, one on an 8-inch feed into the neighborhood, and then an additional 16-inch valve that was actually broken in the closed position, because you can never have life be easy, right? And as we were doing that work, we actually continued to get additional low pressure complaints from the same neighborhood. We did provide notifications to residents while we were doing this work that they will possibly have some low pressure. The 16-inch valve repair actually turned out to be a lot more complicated than we initially thought. It was about 12 to 13 feet deep, which was actually over the limit of both expertise and equipment that our distribution and collection crews had. So we had to hire an outside contractor to perform that work. Again, in order to minimize disruption to both the residents and then the businesses, we completed that repair overnight on Friday, the 31st of July through the morning of the 1st of August. We actually had Union Avenue closed and had detours around through that time frame, and I think that the road was open back up about noon or 1 o'clock on Saturday, the 1st of August. We kind of continued on repairing the 8-inch valve, and then we actually found another water main break on that 16-inch line about 100 feet from the initial water main break, and we completed all those repairs by last Friday. because a picture is worth 1,000 words, I will show you here is some pictures of our distribution and collection crews completing that first repair. And I don't know, can you guys see the cursor on my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so right there and right there are, I think, the two main problem areas for the leak that occurred. And you can kind of see this is the pavement up here. It wasn't excessively deep. You can see that it's not boxed, and per OSHA regulation, we actually sloped it and the soils were suitable that we didn't need to. So you can see the guys down in here fixing. And then over here, you can see them putting on a repair clamp and finishing up the repairs. So all things being said and done, that was actually a fairly easy repair. The guys are very used to doing those types of things. The second repair that we did on that 16-inch valve, this is the one that was very deep and complex. So you can kind of see that it's dark while they're doing the work. You have the trench boxes that actually stick up above the excavation. I think these pictures are great because it does kind of show how deep the repair actually is. So you can kind of see how far down with the ladder, and that's not even really the top. And then, so the guys here are completing cutting out the broken valve. You can see some of the water leaking over here as they're cutting that valve out. And then they continue on with the repair. So this is that brand new 16-inch butterfly valve. And then they're buttoning it back up over here. It's kind of hard to see. This guy has a flashlight. Over here you can kind of see the overhead light. So it was always interesting doing that kind of work at night. Those are all the pictures that I have, but just to kind of summarize the lessons learned meeting that we did after that weekend, where we put a lot of people out of service, and I believe actually the city manager stopped by the site to kind of see what was going on. We figured out a couple things. So one of the problems is that area of town, we abut Denver Water and possibly another municipality where there's lots of different ownerships of water lines in the area. And so we're trying to figure out if maybe a valve inadvertently got closed by someone thinking they were on their own water line when they were actually on Inglewood's. And then we figured out kind of the hard way, because those are the lessons that you learn best, that we should probably verify the secondary feed is in fact live and running before we shut down the main feed where a break is located. So we have a couple good lessons learned moving forward in order to make sure that we don't have such a large outage again. And then as you're fixing things, we found this lots of times where you find other things that are broken. So broken valves, another broken main. And so the repairs actually took not quite a month to actually get everything all finished by the time it was said and done.
Well, kudos to the crew. What do you
Thank
think? What do you think, Kate?
Thank you. I do have one question. As far as for the customers, since we had a lot of air running through our lines and then we had to kind of flush the lines once the water was returned, are we going to be charged for that? Do you know? What is the typical protocol?
I do not. That is a great question, and I will get back to you with an answer on that for sure.
Okay. But thank you. And I know that it looked like there was another leak on Federal on Union, like I think it was this weekend. There was like water in the middle of the road.
Yes.
And was that also part of the other breaks you guys found, or was that separate?
Correct. That one was that secondary break that they found, that they finished up the repair on that this past week. Yep.
Okay, great. Well, thank you.
You're
Angela,
welcome.
was that the valve that got inadvertently opened back up?
That was the valve that got inadvertently opened back up by a different agency. And so that's another thing that we have on our list of things to do, is kind of have a meeting with Denver Water to go over kind of who owns what. And one interesting thing that our distribution and collections superintendent actually found was that they make these little inserts that you can put into a valve box, and it would say something like City of Englewood or something. Because I don't know if you've ever seen a valve box or a manhole cover, but they all pretty much just say manhole or valve. And so it doesn't really differentiate Denver water versus Englewood water. And so I think it's happened in the past where people have operated things that they thought were theirs and it wasn't. So kind of having this extra level of safety where they take the valve box cover off and see a little insert that says City of Englewood, then that will be kind of an extra layer of safety for both the folks working on water lines and then the residents, so that we don't have some of these issues.
Yeah, and I would add to that I think Angela's being somewhat kind. Essentially what happened was we had a Denver fire truck come up to the valve, and they thought they were closing it, and they actually opened it, and we had our repair crew in the hole actually with the pipe open. The pipe was cut. They were in the excavation, and they were trying to fix the pipe. And the fire department came, saw the leaking valve, thought to themselves, oh, we'll just shut it. And in actuality, what they did is they opened it. And so fortunately, our guys had just come out of the hole. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, we might have a much more significant issue on our hands. So we have I talked to City Manager Lewis about getting a conversation with Denver Fire to ensure that something like that doesn't happen again. I think it's, they talk about near misses as it relates to safety. That was a near miss.
Yes.
Very good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can we, just as a way to make sure that this does happen, can we just be your accountability piece to say, hey, the Water and Sewer Board's going to ask you in a month, how did that conversation go with Denver Water? Because
absolutely.
I mean, that's scary to think about that.
Yeah, actually, and again, it wasn't Denver Water, it was Denver Fire.
Or fire, right. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, they're our fire department now, so they
are our fire department too.
Should be able to talk to them.
Should be pretty easy.
Chuck, yeah, so we just want to follow up and make sure that there's that they understand that sometimes they have to understand what they're opening and closing.
Amen. Amen.
We almost did get Denver Water to replace one of our water lines, because they were out and they met one of our distribution and collections folks, and they said, oh, we're just marking our water line to replace it. We said, well, that's our water line. I said, well, why did you stop them? They would have replaced it for us, and that's the one that has all the leaks in it. So
Chuck, did you have something you wanted to refer to? Chuck Hobenick? I thought you looked like you wanted to speak to something.
Am I unmuted now? No.
Okay.
Okay. You can hear me.
Yeah, we can hear you. I saw your.
No, I didn't really. Going back quite a ways in this whole thing, this whole water thing, I didn't even know this happened, and the leakage and everything. That's major. But going back, the only thing I can say about Englewood water that I don't like is hardness. That's my biggest complaint. It's just buildup of stuff. But I do run my own. I have a carbon filter for drinking water that runs through, and into the refrigerator for refrigerated water. So that might help. But I've never really had a problem with Englewood water taste. So, but otherwise,
okay.
No.
Yes, sir. Somebody had a question? All right. Next question on here, Peter. Don was questioning if we had in our portfolio those 3 ditches. Can you? There, you got it.
So I'm going to turn this one over to Deputy Director Steve Simon, who's going to talk about our ditches. Steve, are you on mute? Is Steve on?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, we got you.
Good, my apologies. So you can see and hear me now.
Well, see your picture that you got, brief history of a ditch.
All righty, well, let's jump right in. Thank you, members. this presentation is a response to member Ross' inquiry as to whether the Petersburg, McBroom, and Brown ditches are in the city's water resources portfolio and active. And the answer to that is yes. And I'll explain that to the board in a high-level overview of Englewood's ditch rights. So starting with the history of ditches, they started back in the 1800s as private companies, actually, and companies went into the ditch digging business to sell irrigation water to ag customers. These companies either initially or eventually got the water right associated with that diversion. And so as the metro area grew and there was less farmland and more residential and commercial, municipal utilities bought into these shares. And as part of being a shareholder, that would dictate what their annual costs would be and what those water right yields would be. So now those original irrigation rights are being used for municipal purposes. However, they are restricted to the irrigation season, and that typically is in the April to May to October timeframe. So this is the map that you should have seen in your packet. This shows our 7 primary local ditches. In purple are the 2 active ditches that actually have a physical connection to Englewood's system. That's the city ditch and the McBroom ditch. The ditches in red are active ditches, but they don't have a physical connection to our system. So we actually, we use that water resource through an alternative delivery point. And then the black dash lines, those are inactive ditches that also have an alternative delivery point. So these ditch rights are a really key component of our water supply portfolio. They're some of the most senior rights we have in our portfolio, and they represent the volumetric majority of water rights in our portfolio. So they're definitely an important and critical part of that. Of those 7 ditches, 2 of them are maintained by Englewood utility staff. That's the, excuse me, McBroom ditch and city ditch. And the remaining are either active, but maintained by others, or they're inactive, and they no longer require maintenance. So I want to point out real quick that the ditch term can be misleading, and honestly it was a bit misleading to me when I first started. We refer to all of these as ditches. Sometimes we're referring to ditches that are no longer active. In that case, we're actually referring to the right instead of the physical ditch itself. And some ditches, like the city ditch, are actually buried pipeline. In fact, the majority of city ditch at this point is buried pipeline. So if you were to go out and attempt to follow that alignment that's shown on the screen there, in a lot of places you're not going to see anything because it's the ditch has, over time, been converted to pipeline and it's now buried. So summarizing up those rights, again, we have basically 3 varieties of ditches. We have our direct delivery active ditches, which are the city and McBroom, the city ditch being one of our very important rights to our system. We also have the alternate delivery active ditches. That also includes the McBroom. So McBroom, we actually can take a direct connection off of Bear Creek. However, that's rarely used. It's a pretty junior right. But the other McBroom right that we have is actually one of the the most senior right in our system, dating back to 1859. But again, we take that water through an alternate delivery point. And then we also have Nevada and Last Chance on that alternate delivery active ditch category. And then finally, the inactive ditches where we've retained the water right to them and can take that water right through a separate delivery point, include the Petersburg, Brown, and Olson and Bell. So I think one of the takeaways from this slide is the majority of our ditch rights are actually, they're not a physical connection to the water supply. They're actually, they're delivered at an alternate delivery point, which include where I've indicated the system connection, the Allen Water Treatment Plant, the Union Avenue intake, where we can bring water up the South Platte and send that to the Allen plant, the city ditch, the McClellan Reservoir, and even the alluvial wells that we use to irrigate the Broken T golf course. So that's ditches in a nutshell. I'd be happy to take any questions if folks want to dive a bit deeper, and I'll answer to the best of my ability.
Don Roth, you're the one that brought it up. Does that satisfy your questions?
Yes, it answers all of them.
Very good. I just have one question. Does that main city ditch go clear into Denver Country Club as I remember? Does that go to Denver Country Club as it goes out of Inglewood?
It goes into Harvard Gulch, and my Denver geography is not excellent yet. I'm not sure the proximity of Harvard Gulch to the country club, but yeah, it starts at the downstream end of the Chatfield Dam, and it's active up to Harvard Gulch.
Right. Okay. That answered what I was looking for.
Good.
Yeah, Clyde.
Yes, sir, Don.
When they did the T-Rex project, Denver disconnected the ditch at Harvard Gulch.
Oh, okay.
So they still use the ditch, but they run recycled wastewater through it now.
Okay, that's why Denver Country Club probably getting that. Yeah, okay. All right.
Chairman,
Yes,
Member Anderson would like to say something.
Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, and thank you for that presentation, Deputy Director Simon. I have a couple of questions about it. Do we maintain the ditch downstream from the Allen Water Plant to wherever it dead ends in Denver? And if so, what's the purpose of keeping that operational?
We do. You're talking about between the Allen Treatment Plant and Chatfield?
No, the other direction, going towards
beyond Allen Plant to Harvard Gulch. I do not know the answer to that question. Director Enright, I'm not sure if you do. If not, I can follow up with the board.
You know, I think we should actually follow up, and we can get you the full limits. We do own the ditch. I think we actually do own it all the way to Harvard Gulch, and that we do maintain it all the way to Harvard Gulch.
I think you're right.
But I would just have to verify that.
Yeah, and I'm curious if there have been any problem. I know it's all through my neighborhood here. It's all buried pipeline, and it goes right underneath. In some places, it appears to go through yards, across lots, possibly even underneath structures in some places. I sometimes am concerned about that, since it's not really all that useful. Is it at a risk of breaking? Is there do we have sinkhole risks or anything like that? Just crossed my mind when I walk through the neighborhood. Is this safe? Is it well maintained, and all those kind of things, since it's not all that useful for us? So I would love more information on that.
I would let you in on one thing, Joe. I do remember that in the early days when they were encasing the ditch and piping it, that when they got to the neighborhood where people had the ditch, there were a lot of them didn't want it covered. And they said they'd take on the liability of leaving it open in the event somebody fell in and drowned, et cetera, et cetera. And that was one thing I can remember back in the older days, that that was a question was brought up, because we all thought on the board that it ought to be piped all the way for safety factors and eliminate any problem with muskrats or rats or stuff like that getting into the line. And I also think that the city takes some of their water off of that ditch, don't we? And it goes into the reservoirs over there by the Allen plant, or not?
Yes. Go ahead, Steve.
Yes, Chair Wiggins. There's two connection points. We can divert it directly off of the city ditch to the Allen plant. There's also the McClellan pump station south of Mineral Avenue that can pump from the city ditch into the McClellan Reservoir.
Yeah, I think it's just the part downstream from the Allen treatment plant that I'm curious about, since it's not actively all that useful as far as I know, since it dead ends at Harvard Gulch. What do we, I mean, I don't know. You have to do something with the water that you don't use out of it, and I'm sure it collects stormwater as well. I'm just, I don't know. I find the city ditch history fascinating, and I'm just curious about how it's currently being maintained. So, thank you for that.
John Moore, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to add, I think when I was on council is when we last dealt with that, or we dealt with it. And the citizens, if my memory is correct, did not want it filled in. And so, concerned about the cottonwood trees and, other vegetation and the aesthetics. And so I think that's where there was a commitment to at least maintain a certain flow through there. But my memory is that the citizens really did not want to pipe it in. And so it was a kind of a compromise that made among all parties.
Yeah, I agree with you. I remember that too. It was a compromise.
I've had my hand up for a little while. Can I ask a question?
Cheryl, go ahead. Cheryl?
Actually, now I've forgotten it. I've had my hand up for 5 minutes. Sorry. Never mind. I can't remember what it was.
Are you having a senior moment?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, Chairman, we have Mayor Olson's hand up. She would like to speak.
I'm
Go,
laughing. I'm laughing at Cheryl. We had a late night on budgets last night, so she can have a moment. I was going to say that I too remember, and John, we've been on water and sewer together a couple of different times, but I do think when I took over from council, we were dealing with this with the covering of the ditch. And it's always been very contentious, and I never understood fully the philosophy behind it. It seemed to me like it would be better to leave it open for a number of reasons that were aesthetic as well as being able to get at it. But I don't know, you'll be able to see in the minutes over water and sewer board meetings, consistent conversations, and we even had someone come and contest things. We had to do a hearing once. So I'm sure there's varying decisions that were made, but it would be great to have a most current understanding of where is it open, why is it not closed, and what our philosophy is around the whole thing. What is the best? I do think that we maintain it to Harvard Gulch. That's my memory of it too, but I could be having a Cheryl moment.
Well, that gives Steve something to work on now.
Indeed, I can return that information to the board.
Very good. Thank you.
No,
All right.
I remember.
Go ahead, Ms. Wink. What do you have?
Thank you. Mr. Simon, this is back when you had your presentation up. I actually wanted to have another view of your slide 2 of the 3. If I could ask. And I also wanted to thank you for such a perfect presentation. All right, that's what I needed to see. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, Cheryl.
Oh, I'm finished. Thank you very much. That's what I needed to see, Mr. Simon.
All right.
Great, you're welcome.
Okay, we'll return to our regular business here. And we move down to old business, water, sewer rates and fee study progress update number 3.
Okay, that's me. Let me switch to my other presentation. Make sure I have the right one up here. Oh, shoot, I just pulled up the wrong one. Apologize. Okay, slideshow. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen again. This is the 3rd update of the work that we are doing on rates and fees for.
We don't have it, Peter.
Yep, I'm about to share it.
Oh.
Here we go. I was talking and sharing at the same time, so maybe I should do one or the other. Can everybody see it now?
Yeah, we got it.
Okay, so I would like to again introduce Carol Malesky and Siyuan Rao, who are with Stantec Consultants. They are the ones that are doing all the work in the background to get us to this point where we have strong financial models and backup data and analysis for the presentations that I've been summarizing over the summer for you, as well as this last one. And so this is the next step in the rate and fee process. And what we're going to cover is we're going to first review the stuff we've talked about to date, realizing that we're heading down the budget path, and so we want to make sure that we are gaining consensus on the approach, because the budgets that I just presented earlier today are based on these numbers, and so we want to ensure that we're keep checking in to make sure we're on the right path. Also will be a quick review of the financial model. And then we're going to shift and spend a little more time on what it really means from an individual customer's bill. And so we'll go through what the individual pieces of the increase look like on each individual's bills, and then how that ultimately rolls up into the total amount that we are proposing to charge on a monthly basis. So connection fees, we'll go quickly. This is the one-time access fee, essentially. You've seen this slide before. So we are going to propose, like we did last time, to continue to move forward with the RCNLD method, which is the replacement cost new less depreciation. It's a widely accepted methodology, and we think it's appropriate for us. And so again, the budget numbers are built off of this. So those previous slides are based on this. You can see what that result is again, and it puts us essentially not at the top, not at the bottom, but somewhere in the lower half of fees. So that's all I had on fees. On miscellaneous fees, so these are the fees that we charge that are just, you can see what they are. They're all new account setup and turn off and red tag and labor for administrative and engineers, and so you can see all these fees. And so our current charge is in the first column, our calculated charge. So what Stantec did is they looked at what the actual level of effort was for the implementation of any one of these activities, and then came up with the associated cost from a resources and staffing perspective. And so you can see that calculated charge. And then next to that, the third column is the recommended charge, which is either identical to the current charge, but very closely related to the calculated charge. Or in some cases, like if you look at the third one down, the engineer labor went from $75 current charge, our calculated was $82.32. So we're recommending to move that to $85 an hour, which is an increase of $10. And so you can see that actually, based on the analysis, the majority of our charges our fees are pretty right on. There's about 5, I believe, that are actually, we're making recommendations to do a small increase to, or 4 for an increase. And then the last one at the very bottom is a new fee that is a inspection that we do that we actually don't charge for, that is a commonly charged for activity. And so let me stop there and check to see if anybody has questions on connection fees or miscellaneous fees.
I don't hear anybody or see anybody.
We'll keep going.
I'm sorry, it's John. A real quick one, and I don't see where I can raise my hand, so I'll just do it manually.
Yeah.
Why is a citizen asking for a fire hydrant flow test inspection?
So these aren't generally asked for by citizens, they're asked for by developers. So as developers are redeveloping, they put in a hydrant. There's a flow test associated with that hydrant.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Takes care of that. Go ahead, Peter.
Okay, so these are the financial plans that we've talked about. I'm just going to review quickly the preferred scenarios. And so we're continuing to work and optimize these scenarios. And essentially what we've proposed for in 2021 is that 4% increase and that $15 CIF, recognizing that we still have this debt fund percentage number 10 years out that we are continuing to work on, because it is a longer term challenge. As we've worked with the model and continued to refine the numbers, the difference you'll notice from last month to this month is, as we move from 2022 out to 2030, the rate actually went to 4.5%, and that's because we were actually running into challenges, especially out here in these later years, of meeting our senior lien and other debt coverage. And so we wanted to, we've revised the capital plan to some degree to help account for that. But we also wanted to balance cost impacts to the customers and the capital plan execution, as well as keeping these metrics in place, recognizing that long-term we have this debt funding piece that we'll want to continue to work that challenge over the next several years. this is what it looks like. You can see the two graphs that I go to are the upper right. You can see we get to the point where we start to get parallel with our debt funding, and it's leveling off. And then if you go to the middle lower chart, you can see I'd like to see more of this area here funded with operating cash, and that's our capital funding, and potentially work to smooth out this debt funding of that capital. That's something we're going to continue to work on year over year, well into the future, and that means optimizing our capital plan. When we get better information on our systems, either through the modeling or through the CCTV, for example, on the sewer side, that's what helps us become more knowledgeable in terms of the needs of the system, and then further refine these. On the sewer financial plan, this one's the same as what we talked about last time, 4.5% increases until 2024, and then you can see on 2025 our debt drops off, and so we keep it at a 3% rate so that we don't get behind. Keeping in mind that outside the 2030 window, we do have some more significant capital investments, especially tied to South Platte Renew. And so as we move into the next several years, we'll keep that in mind as these larger capital needs move into the 10-year window. This one looks better to me, because you can see this debt number percentage becomes less, and then down in the middle you can see that we're funding a number of our capital projects with a significant portion of operating cash. So this is the rate survey comparison for those two financial models we put together resulted in a change of our rates from 46.48 to 63.04. Last month it was 63.45, so it's gone down slightly, 41 cents. I'm sure everyone's very excited about that, but it's a little bit. But you can see what we're proposing is right next to our neighbor Littleton in terms of being near the bottom, and then average is right around that $80 mark, $75 to $80 mark. Okay, so now we're going to move. So any questions on that? Okay. So we are going to move into the cost of service and rate design. So all of those financial plans need to translate to what we charge to the customer. And so when we first looked at the charges as a whole, we wanted to address a number of things: flat rate metering and declining block rate, and a number of things that we think are somewhat out of date. What we found as we've gotten into it is we don't necessarily want to change everything all at once, because we don't necessarily have all the data that we need in order to do that effectively. And so what we've done for this round is we've looked at our existing rate schedule. We've adjusted our equivalent meter ratio. So this is a significant piece of how the charges translate up for meter size. So as meter sizes go from a 3/4 inch meter all the way up to a 3-inch meter or a 6-inch meter, there's a bigger demand on the system. There's a bigger just cost from an administrative perspective. And we looked back at those ratios, and we're having a hard time figuring out how they were determined. And so what we're proposing is to go with the industry recommendations, which are out of the American Water Works Association manuals, and you'll see those in coming slides. We also are recommending, and we think this is very important, to move to monthly billing. When we have monthly billing information, we can actually understand how people are using water, and we have more clarity and more resolution in how people use water on a monthly basis. And so we can understand peaking as it relates to when we get peaks in terms of water usage and things like that. And so by moving to monthly billing, we can understand the profile of the water use over an annual period of our users. And then from there, we can actually make further adjustments to the rate model in order to ensure that the appropriate customers are paying the appropriate amount. As we move forward, we want to look at customer trends from those monthly billings to make those potential changes into the future, and then implement some kind of a metering infrastructure that allows us, with AMI, you can actually have hour by hour readings of your meter, so the customer can actually have a much more control over how they use their water and much more control over their and how much they use and when they use it, and ultimately what their bill is. And so ultimately, the more we get additional data, the more we can refine these structures to make them even more equitable. That's what we will do in the future. So here's what it looks like. So on the equivalent meter schedule, so over the next several slides, I'm going to throw a lot of numbers at you, and it's going to be a lot to absorb. I'm going to try and summarize it, but if you have questions or if it's confusing, it's a lot of information. And so these are our general meter sizes to the left. Our current meter, equivalent meter current ratios are in this column here. And we can't understand how they were developed, and we can't link back to any kind of calculation or anything that makes sense. And so what we've done is we've gone to M1, which is the manual one, which is a manual practice for AWWA for equivalent meter sizes as it relates to the admin charge. And so you can see a 5/8 and a 3/4 at 1. So whatever we determine the equivalent single family unit admin charge is, that's a 1. And then it scales up as you get bigger. And so when you get to a 10-inch, it's the equivalency of 34 of those 3/4 inches in terms of its effect on the system as it relates to the meter installation and the service line. So we'll move to the next column, and then there's the hydraulic capacity piece. And so this is actually just based on square area of a circle. And so if you think of a 3/4 inch diameter circle has a certain limit to how much water can get through. When you get up to a 6-inch or a 10-inch, that's equivalent to, and in the 10-inch case, it's equivalent to 140 single family units. So a 10-inch user, which we have one 10-inch user, which is the hospital, that ends up being equivalent to 140 homes in terms of its hydraulic access to the system and the needs of the system in terms of the broader construction of the treatment plant, pump stations, distribution lines to supply that user. So our recommendation is to move to those two ratios. So what this means from an administrative fee perspective is right now our administrative fee is $8.51 for a 5/8, and you can see how it goes up relative to the current ratio. And this is our total of 10,717 customers. And so our proposed ratio goes from 1 to 34, and you can see that the effect is it will move from 851 to 885. You'll actually see that the 3/4 goes down because we're trying to standardize it. So it's one area where one of the fees actually goes down, and it actually affects the majority of our customers. And then everything else is multiplied by this proposed ratio. And so you can see at a 10-inch, their admin fee will go from $40 a month or $40 a quarter to $300 a quarter. And if you again think of the size and magnitude of that meter and that system, there you would expect that a bigger user would have a bigger charge. So outside the city, we actually have some users that are outside of our service area, that are outside the city, but we serve, and so we have multipliers for there. And you can see the right-hand column of the multipliers, and they're kind of all over the map, and we're not exactly sure, again, how they were necessarily generated. But if you look at this number right here for the 1,000 to 400,000, the inside rate, so that's the rate per 1,000 gallons of water that you use. It's 329, and if you're outside the city, it's 461 per 1,000, which is a multiplier of 1.4. So what we look at and why there's a multiplier is you have the total revenue requirement for 2021 to fund the water system needs of 2021. So we have inside customers who are referred to from an industry perspective as owners, and they assume the risk of that investment in that utility. So all the aspects of the water utility are assumed and the responsibility of the owners. The outside city customers are non-owners, and so that again is an industry term that they don't necessarily have the risk responsibility of the investment. So in theory, they could go off and form their own water district, and we would be left holding the bag as it relates to the infrastructure that's been built and developed and installed to serve them. And so the way you accomplish that is you have them pay a surcharge to compensate the owners for their assumption of the total risk. And when we went through that calculation, and there are a lot of numbers that go into this calculation, it turned out to be 1.36 times. So anybody with a finance background, it utilizes the weighted cost of capital and then uses that information to then plug into a whole bunch of other formulas that I don't know what they are. And we ultimately, but we have all this data, we have all the spreadsheets and the data that show these calculations. I'm just probably not the most well-versed in being able to explain it, but essentially we came up at 1.36 times. And so the recommendation is to align all the rates at 1.4 times, which again, if you go back to this previous slide, is where the usage rate is right now. So we'd recommend that all these multipliers align with that 1.4. So what that means from an outside city perspective is you would see these current fees move up when you add the increase, the rate increase, as well as that multiplier. An outside city user would have a monthly or a quarterly administrative charge of $12.39 or just over $4 a month. And so the capital improvement fee is a new fee this year, so we don't have any existing fee to compare to. And so this is where we would use the hydraulic piece, the hydraulic ratio, to calculate that increase in terms of demand on the system and access on the system. So if you have a 1-inch meter, you have 1.7 times a normal house of access and demand on the system, which means that your proportionate share of the capital investment at $15 would be $25. And so you can see what that does as you move up into larger meters. And this is where with a 10-inch meter that has the impact of the equivalency of 140 homes, you end up with a monthly charge of $2,100. And I'm assuming that that's a much, because that's a much larger entity, that is proportionally the same as if you were a single family home with a 3/4 inch connection. So again, I told you there's a lot of numbers on this. And so when you look at the quarterly water bill in terms of its effect, you can see what the inside city versus the outside city effect is from a usage existing is 329 for 1 to 400,000 gallons. And then as you get over 400,000, it's 204. It's the same for 3/4. So as we put the 4% increase on, it goes to 342, 212 for both of these. We now have a CIF, which is $45. Again, this is quarterly. And then we have an administrative charge that moves to $885 from a few slides ago. Outside the city, this has that 1.4 factor. So you can see what that does to those rates as it relates to an outside city customer. This is what it looks like from a monthly perspective. Unfortunately, 400,000 doesn't easily divide by 3. You end up with a 3 with a bar over the top of it. So it's 101 to 133,000 gallons. And then once you get over 133,000 gallons in a month, which is an incredible amount of usage, you can see where the rates are. This is where you have the capital investment fee, and you can see that higher capital investment fee for an outside city customer. So on the sewer bill side, this is just a straight increase of 4.5%. So we keep our rate structure the way it is. You can see there's a treatment component at $3.25, a collection component of 43 cents for inside the city, and then we have a minimum charge. And so oftentimes a user defaults to the minimum charge, which is $70.50. From an outside perspective, it's a little bit less because they don't use our collection system. They're only using the treatment component. Now, you may ask, why are these two numbers the same when we just talked about the 1.4 for outside city? And that's because these are set in the actual agreements. And so in the agreement, there's a provision. Some of the agreements have a provision for 1.05% in terms of an increase charge per customer. And so this might be something that, as we look at those agreements into the future and understanding that there is rationale for why you charge a multiplier to cover the risk assumed by the owners of the entity. So in this case, the owners of the entity are Littleton and Englewood, and the entity is South Platte Renew, which is a $500 million wastewater facility that those two cities are ultimately the responsible owners of the risk for. And so it might be something that we look at as we continue to look at those connector agreements and find a way to align those. And so this is what the increase looks like on a monthly perspective. You can see just basically it's the previous slide divided into monthly. And then here's where we get to that number that's been in that chart that we've been showing for several months. And so we have the admin fee, and so this is a monthly bill. So the admin fee is $2.95 for water. The sewer is $24.56. The usage fee for water, and this is assuming 6,000 gallons of water usage, is $20.53. The capital investment fee is $15. So the water total is $38.48. The sewer total is $24.56 for a total bill of $63.04. You can see just below that what it is existing today, and you can see that's where the increase is, and the increase is largely in the water side to start to build up the revenues so that we can attack the projects that we need. You can see the same thing here from a outside city perspective. This is what their bill would look like, and this includes that 1.4 multiplier, which ultimately goes from $52 a month to $76 a month. So that was a lot of information. I can pause here. I only have a few more slides, and then I can open up for general questions. So why don't I do that, and then we'll come back to any of these slides if you want to.
Okay, go.
So there's been some questions about delinquencies and accounts, and you can, since COVID and since March, because this is definitely a concern, you know, as it relates to, we're trying to address the funding of the water system, its relation to the charges charged by our neighbors, and then at the same time we have COVID and an economic recession. I don't know if it's technically a recession. I think it is. But whatever the technical term is, we have economic troubles these times, right now. And so we wanted to look at the average delinquency in accounts. So these are people who are past due on their bill. And what you can see is generally the black line is where we generally fall, which is right around 50, a little over 50. And right now, as you can see what happened in March, it went up to just over 200. Then it came down as the quarter ended, and then we got a new quarterly bill. and then that's gone up again. This is what it looks like from a revenue perspective. And so it essentially right now equates to around, right now in the month of July, our delinquency rate is $118,000. And so when you look at that in terms of the total value of the two funds, it is essentially 2% of those annual revenues. So it is definitely not a positive trend, but it's also not such a significant amount that it's something that has a huge impact to our ability to produce water and collect wastewater and treat wastewater. This is why the cap is important. So this is a customer assistance program. So we want to make sure as we move through this these proposals as it relates to adjusting our rates, that we have an option for people who are experiencing hardship, who meet a certain level of a requirement for assistance, that there's an avenue for them to help them bridge this gap as it relates to these changes in rates. And so this is very similar to the slide you saw last month. Some of the things that we've talked about are that maybe the discount and assistance level is directly tied to the, excuse me, directly tied to the capital improvement fee. Funding sources could be a general fund transfer if it makes sense. I know that's been a discussion, or a donations. We can have a donations part of our bill where people, if they want to donate to help their neighbor, that would be a way to do that. One of the challenges of these that we have to figure out from a logistics perspective is how it gets administered. Is it in-house city staff, which is going to put more pressure on in-house resources, or is it a partner? And then we've just attached a link to a couple of examples of our neighbors out there right now in terms of potential programs that we could use, either any part of or whatever as a model. So that's just, as you're on your as you look at these slides, if you want to click on these and check them out, they're a couple program examples. Okay, so after tonight, what we're hoping to get out of from the board is a consensus on rates and fees in terms of a direction. We're going to, from there, we'll continue to work on the customer assistance program, the public outreach campaign that will be ongoing through the fall and actually into the first quarter of next year. Then there's ultimately a final report and 2021 budget approval. I will add that right now our proposal is that the rate increases themselves would go into effect on April 1 of next year. And that is so that we can get the new billing system in place that can handle monthly billing. So we change to monthly billing and then do the rate increases all at the same time, so that a customer doesn't experience this significant hit on January 1 with their quarterly bill, and then it goes to a monthly billing on April 1, and then it backs back off to the point where they can budget it from a monthly perspective. We think it makes more sense to link those two, and so we've subsequently adjusted the financial models to assume that the revenues will not come in until April 1st. And so with all of that, it's the opportunity for the board to give us feedback, discussion, concerns. I know I did have some concerns raised about the speed with which we are making these, or the magnitude with which we are making the increase, and so I would encourage any kind of feedback that you can give us throughout the course of the last several months since April. We've been trying to balance those two things, that massive capital need and identification, and really the conversation from earlier in the night about, you know, the quality of the taste of the water and the infrastructure. You saw some of the valve replacements, and just that one line turned out we had 2 broken valves and 2 areas of a main feeder that was broken, with the effect on the customer making that adjustment. And that customer adjustment is something that is new for Englewood residents, but if you were to move across our borders to our neighbors, is pretty well established in a number of our adjacent water providers. So with all that, I would turn it over to you, Chairman Wiggins, and open it up for discussion and feedback.
All righty. Anybody want to make a comment, suggestion, discussion, concerns? Everybody is on board here.
It looks like Drevis has her hand up.
I do. I'm still concerned about that $15 a month. And I've thought about it, and I'm just wondering if you can't do a compromise and do $7.50 a month for 1 year, because people are looking at that, and then bump it up to the 15. I had originally suggested $5 a month. Someone said it's like a Band-Aid. You pull it off and everybody's on the same page. But I work with people in my neighborhood, and I work with people in general who are on fixed income, and right now is such a horrible time. I don't know how long it'll take most people to recover from the loss of income. I know my husband was furloughed for a number of months. He's back at work now, but we're behind on things. So $15 a month is still a lot of money. It's a huge chunk for people on fixed incomes. Is there any compromise, a room of compromise on that? Maybe do $7.50 a month for the first year and then bump it up to the 15. That's the only thing that really concerns me. The rest of it makes sense. It all falls in line with everything you've said, you know, following the other models. You know, that's where I stand.
Anybody else? Well, it looks like you get a general consensus, I think, from the group that we're okay with what you're doing and proceed with it. And
So can I just ask a question?
Go ahead, Mayor.
Wiggins. I think the comment that Ms. Ridley made is important for us to actually have a conversation about, just because this is such a difficult thing for us to do on council. I really would like to hear a few more of you respond to that. Just because, I mean, I think council's going to probably move ahead on this, so I can only say I'm one of 7, right? So we need to know that you are confident to move forward on this.
well, I'll poll a whole board member. How about you, Mr. Hobenick? What are your feelings? You don't have any sound on, Chuck. Go ahead, Chuck.
That's what I said. No.
We didn't hear you, buddy.
No, I think that we're in line to go ahead with this. It would be nice if we could taper it off a little bit at the first, I think, and to help with the people that are so affected financially by this COVID thing. But
Okay.
whatever we can do, otherwise, it has to be done eventually,
Right.
and might as well start doing it as soon as we can.
Mr. Roth?
I agree. You know, it looks rather intimidating, especially in light of, you know, some of the current economic conditions. So that's my big concern, is whether you're going to have a big revolt.
Okay.
when it all goes
Caitlin? How do you feel, Caitlin?
I mean, I'm fine with going forward. I still think it's gonna be a very hard pill to swallow for a majority of our customers, just because it's gonna be hitting them really hard, or it's gonna be a lot of money hitting them at the worst time. So I'm sure a lot of people are gonna be very angry about it, but I think moving to the monthly bill is gonna be the best for us. Just because it won't hurt as much in the long term, but initially it's going to be very painful.
Okay.
So that's not going to be fun for council or for
Mr.
us.
Moore? Mr. Moore?
My main concern would just be announcing it up front. I don't have an objection at all to the tapered approach. You know, I am curious if we were to do it in $5 increments. So it's 5 the first year, 10 the second, 15 the third. Well, it won't be 15 the third because somehow we have to make up for what we didn't collect in year 1 and year 2.
Right.
So I'm not sure how different that looks, but you know, I respect the need to ease into this, and as long as, to me, as long as it's clear that it's coming is the number one issue, so that we don't appear to be pulling surprises year after year. So I you know, if we thought we could come up with a tapered approach that didn't just leave us, you know, permanently at 20 instead of 15, you know, I certainly would not be object to it.
Mr. Martinez.
I mostly agree with what everyone has said so far. We're definitely in an interesting time in our history, but I understand there is a purpose behind the increase. We're not doing this just because we need to raise money somehow for no reason. There's a purpose for this down the road. So just thinking long term, I understand that this is important for the community at large, not just now, but in the future. People are going to be upset no matter what. So I agree with Mr. Moore about it's about how we introduce it to the community. I think that's an entirely separate conversation to have. I'm not sure the entirety of the communications department on how they do that, but I understand and feel for people who this is going to come as a big shock, but I'd be more concerned if we don't do this now, what's going to happen later. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you. Ms. Ridley, you have any more you want to add?
The only other thought I have is that on those charts that you were showing about what happened with people not being able to meet their bill through the initial hit of COVID, you give them a huge enough increase on their bill when they're financially strapped, and you won't be able to collect the money anyway, at least not right away. Is there any way that you've looked at that impact and kind of planned for it, or are you just assuming that eventually you're going to be able to collect all the money? That's, you know, part of my thought with the tapering is that maybe you won't have as many people not being able to pay at all. So I don't know.
All right, Mayor, does that give you some?
It does. I wanted to have everybody think a little bit more about it. Peter, I'm sorry, some of it I was cut out on. I'm not sure if you went over some of the financial help that we might give to lower income individuals. Did you go over that?
Yes. So the CAP program is something that it would be specifically, so essentially the people right now that would be that $118,000 of people that are behind on their bill. There's probably a portion of them that would be eligible for a cap because of fixed income or loss of job or economic circumstance that is affecting them.
I just missed some of that, and sorry, and I see Member Anderson's hand up too. But I did want to say something that is not really ours to do in this committee, but we are looking at single trash hauling as a city. It could save residents up to $15 a month as well, and that's a month if we go that route. So we're trying to balance all of this out to figure, okay, we have rates going up in some areas, and if we go to some other things that might bring rates down, would that help overall for people? But council is still trying to, you know, figure out this all too. So sorry, Member Anderson, I'll let you go.
Thank you. I just want to respond that it's really helpful to hear you guys' thoughts on all of that. Thanks for going around, Chair Wiggins, to each member to get their feedback. I think I share those concerns about the $15 jump and have thought a lot about tapering or something to that effect. But kind of where I've come out on that is I'm afraid that if we put this off, then our system's going to continue to deteriorate. and a year, you know, sitting on it for another year to get that extra $5 is going to continue to put us in the same hole we have been for a long time. So I have been, I'm happy about the monthly billing. I think that's going to help and help put it in help communications really put this in context to what other cities around us are doing. There are low income residents in all these other municipalities, many of them that are more expensive than us, and they're making it. And even after we do these increases, we're still going to be towards the lower end of the spectrum. And we're going to have the cap, you know, hopefully we can get the cap program passed as well and do that. I think those will both the monthly billing and the cap program will help offset the difficulty that some people are going to have with this. So I appreciate that feedback, and hopefully we can do some things to mitigate the challenge that the rest of the city is going to face, and our low income residents especially. So thank you for all that.
Thank you, Joe. You got some good ideas there. I would only comment one thing, or that it will go into effect in April, right? In 2021 that this goes into effect.
That's correct.
And by doing that, we will at least be able to lay a foundation to our people, our customers, to know that this is going to come about and that they should plan and do what best they can to lay aside enough to absorb that so they don't get into a bind. So that's all I comment to it.
Yeah, and if I may, Chairman, they go into effect April 1st, so that it would take a full month of usage, and then a bill would come out sometime in April or in May, and so then you'd be looking at the May-June timeframe of next year is the first time customers would be really experiencing this on a monthly basis as it relates to that increase. And then keep in mind that it's now gone from a quarterly hit of almost $200 a quarter to
Right.
a monthly hit of $60.
Right. Yeah, good point. Right. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Chuck Robinick?
I think too that we need to impress upon those that are being billed more our rates as compared to the other nearby rates.
Other cities. Joe made that good comment. Yeah. Yeah. Well, if nobody else has anything else, I would just like to make one particular comment. A kudos to the city water department. I have a neighbor of mine who came over, of course, and he had a complaint about his water bill, and I suggested that he go down and visit our financial department and the billing department and talk to him. And he did, and he came back and he said he got a $900 refund because they found there was an error. So thank you for that. And he was very happy. He didn't come back and kick me in the butt, so I'm happy. So just a matter of comment there. That was all.
I will pass that along.
Very good. Does anybody else have anything they want to bring up at this meeting? If not, I thank you for your participation, and we will be in an adjournment. And put your face mask on and wash your hands, and have a good evening, guys. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Bye.
See y'all.
Okay.